When my mother was 14 years old, she was with her mother, Standing Holy. They were traveling to Standing Rock by wagon. They had to leave Pine Ridge, Ogallala area. And, they had to make camps all the way here and there. They were going up to visit some relatives up in the Standing Rock area. And my mother said they were in a wagon and she was kind of standing behind the front seat and they were cruising along there. My grandmother was driving and my mother's brother was in the front seat with her. And as they were approaching down this road, here comes a rider on horseback, coming from the other direction. And as he neared the front of the wagon, my grandmother grabbed her shawl she was sitting on, picked it up and wrapped it around her head. And she pulled it up and stopped the wagon. And the rider come riding up at that time. And he was, my mom said he sounded real friendly. He spoke in Lakota. He asked how the family was doing and how you doing. I haven't seen you for a long time. He said, and all this. And, mom said she didn't know who this person was. He was an older man. And all of a sudden, my grandmother spoke from under her shawl. She told him, she said, go away. She says, I never want to look at your face ever again. She says, it's because how you secretly were doing what you did is what you caused the death of my father. And the guy goes, no, he said, don't be saying that, he said. He says, you're wrong and all this. But my grandmother wouldn't take her shawl off. She just said, go away. She said, I don't ever want to look at your face ever again in this life. So pretty soon, she said the guy rode off. So after he went off a little ways, mom told her mother, he's gone. So she took the shawl off her head. And mom said, who is that guy? And she said, his name is Henry Oscar Wonbo. And she said, always beware of him. She said, and then that's the story she told my mother was, she said, it was him. He was a spy in the camp. She said, he was an informant. She said he lived in the camp with her father. He had a teepee set up next to the cabin. And every time, she said, Sitting Bull will have counsel with his, head men and leaders there. He said he sat in on the camp. He would listen in. And then Sitting Bull couldn't figure out, she said, why the Indian agent McLaughlin always knew what Sitting Bull was doing, what his next move was, or what he was planning on doing, or if he was where he was gonna go. And it seemed like this, he always knew. He couldn't figure out what was going on. And all the time, my mom said this one bull would go over to Little Eagle, was the area called Little Eagle, and I was a school teacher who was there. And he had telegraph service. And he would tell this school teacher what Sitting Bull plans were in the council. And he would telegraph McLaughlin at Fort Yates. And that's how he was keeping him informed of what was happening. And all the time, she said that he was a member of the police, the Indian police, that was up there. He was, I guess he was one of the first secret agents, amongst the Lakota people, but that's what he was doing, he was trying to gain a position for himself within the police force and within the reservation system. And when Sitting Bull didn't know how to deal with his ghost dance, because he didn't approve of it, but he had let his people practice the ghost dance to have some kind of hope for the future. And it was getting too out of hand, so it was getting the wintertime and they were still doing it. Some of them were getting frostbite and all this, so he needed to go down and have counsel with Red Cloud and see how they can deal with quelling this ghost dance. And at this time that McLaughlin had made a pact, to Sitting Bull, he said, you can't travel nowhere, you can't do anything without permission from the government, from me. So he said, he told his people, he said, why should I listen to one man, telling me what to do in this country that used to be free to walk on? He says, I'm going to have counsel with Red Cloud. And he said, he started packing his belongings for fast travel. And that night before, said one bull got on his horse and he slipped away. And he rode that horse all the way up to Fort Yates. Instead of going to Little Eagle and do his little telegraphing. He rode the horse all the way up to Fort Yates and told McLaughlin Sitting Bull's plans. He said he's planning on leaving tomorrow, even though you told him he had to have permission. And then he turned around and he had to race back so he wouldn't be missed. And she said he killed that horse, you know, because he rode it all the way up there and he tried to ride it all the way back before the next day. And she said the horse fell, it died, and he ran the rest of the way on foot and got back into his teepee just as the Indian police arrived, you know, to arrest Sitting Bull. And she said this was the reason why my grandmother would never look at his face ever again.